Welcome to the Night Audio Stories channel. And today, I'm bringing you my new original story.
Welcome to the Night Audio Stories channel. This is a horror story called Crimson Mile. The town of Hatchet Falls, Nebraska had exactly two things going for it in November: the grain elevator on Route 9 and Denny's Fuel and Diner, which sat at the junction of 9 and the county road like a survivor of some forgotten war, scarred, functional, and stubbornly lit against the dark. Ray Aldrich pulled his Peterbilt into the lot at 10:15 and sat for a moment with the engine running, listening to the wind throw grit against the windshield. He was 43 years old, divorced twice, and had been driving long haul since he was 22. He knew the road the way other men knew their wives, its moods, its promises, its capacity for sudden, casual cruelty. Tonight, the road had given him nothing but a grinding headache behind his right eye and 40 miles of unbroken dark. He killed the engine and climbed down. The diner had 6 customers and a smell: coffee, grease, something sweeter underneath, like overripe fruit left in a warm room. Ray took a stool at the counter and turned his mug over without being asked. The waitress, a heavy-set woman with reading glasses pushed up into iron-gray air, filled it without looking at him. "Passing through?" she said. "Freight run to Kearney, running ahead of the weather." She glanced at the window. Outside, the dark pressed against the glass like something curious. "Weather's already here," she said. "Radio's saying 6 to 8 inches by morning." Ray wrapped both hands around the mug. 6 to 8 was manageable. He'd driven through worse, but there was something in the way she said it, flat, without the usual Midwestern performance of stoicism, that made him look at her a second time. "Anything good tonight?" "Chicken fried steak." "That'll do." He ate alone. The other customers, 2 farmers in seed caps, a young couple arguing in low voices, an old man in a booth reading a paperback, paid him no attention. The old man was the one that bothered Ray, though he couldn't have said why at first. He was maybe 70, slight, wearing a dark coat that seemed a size too large. He hadn't ordered anything. He had been sitting in that booth, Ray realized, for as long as Ray had been watching, and the waitress hadn't approached him once. Ray finished his steak and pushed the plate away. When he looked toward the booth again, the old man was gone. The paperback lay open on the table, pages down, spine cracked. Ray couldn't see the title from where he sat. He left a 5 on the counter and went back to the truck. The snow started 10 miles out of Hatchet Falls, not the tentative preliminary flurries that usually announce a storm, but the real thing, thick, deliberate, falling in sheets that his wipers struggled to manage. Ray downshifted and settled in. The radio gave him a country station out of Grand Island for 20 minutes, then static, then nothing. He switched it off. He almost missed the figure. It was at the shoulder of the road, standing very still in the cone of his headlights, a man in a dark coat with one arm extended in the classic hitchhiker's posture. In the snow and the dark, Ray had perhaps 2 seconds to process what he was seeing before he was past it. He braked, not hard, the road didn't allow for hard, and he felt the trailer shudder behind him. He sat for a moment, hazards ticking, watching the figure approach in his side mirror. There were rules about hitchhikers. The company had rules. His own experience had rules. You did not stop. The road after midnight in a Nebraska blizzard was not the place for charity. He watched the figure walk towards him through the snow. It moved strangely, not badly. There was no limp, no stumble, but with a precision that seemed at odds with the conditions. Most people walking through 8 inches of wind-driven snow hunched, struggled, fought. This figure moved as if the snow were not there, as if it were walking through a mild afternoon. The coat, Ray could see now that it was the same dark coat, did not flap or billow. The snow seemed to part for it. Ray unlocked the passenger door.
The man climbed in with a single fluid movement that Ray would think about later. The ease of it, the complete absence of the grunt and grab that every person made when climbing into a cab that high. He settled into the seat and pulled the door closed, and looked at Ray with eyes that caught the dashboard light in a way that eyes shouldn't. He was old. The face was deeply lined, the hands folded in his lap, spotted and thin. But old in the way that ancient things were old, not diminished, only accumulated. "Thank you," he said. His voice was accented in a way Ray couldn't place. Not Spanish, not German, not anything from this part of the country. Something older. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "Kearney." Ray looked at him for a moment longer than was polite, then put the truck in gear. They drove in silence for a while. Ray kept his eyes on the road, which demanded most of his attention. The snow was serious now, building on the asphalt, and the county had stopped plowing at 10. He could feel the trailer wanting to drift. "Rough night to be standing out there," Ray said. "I have stood in worse." "Car breakdown?" A pause. "Something like that." Ray glanced at him. The man was looking straight ahead at the snow swirling in the headlights, and there was an expression on his face that Ray couldn't categorize. Not contentment exactly, more like the expression of a man who has been waiting a very long time and now, at last, moving. "I'm Ray. You may call me Kalen." "That a family name?" "It is a very old name," Kalen said. Ray let it go. He'd picked up hitchhikers before, in his younger years more often, and he'd learned to read the ones who wanted to talk against the ones who didn't. Kalen did not want to talk, and yet he found himself talking anyway, which was unusual for him. He told Kalen about the freight run, about the schedule he was keeping, about his daughter in Omaha who was 7 and whose name was Lacey, and who had asked him the week before where clouds went when the sky was clear. "She sounds remarkable," Kalen said. "She's a kid. Children ask the most honest questions." He turned then and looked at Ray with those two reflective eyes. "Where do you think clouds go?" I laughed, despite myself. "They just spread out, right? Evaporate. They're still there, just invisible." "Yes," Kalen said softly. "That is one way to disappear." The way he said it made Ray's hands tighten on the wheel. Not threatening. The tone wasn't threatening. It was sad. A kind of sadness that had been packed down and compressed over so much time that it had become something else, something dense and permanent, like coal becoming something harder. He turned on the radio and got static. He left it on anyway. Around midnight, Ray couldn't see the dashboard clock clearly through the ice building on the defroster vents. He noticed the smell. It wasn't bad, exactly. It was sweet and cold, like the smell he associated with the old church his grandmother had taken him to as a boy in Chadron. Stone and incense, and something mineral underneath. The smell of a place that had been inhabited by bodies that had since departed. Not death, exactly. The aftermath of death. The negative space it left. He opened his window a crack. The wind screamed in and the snow drove against his face, and he closed it again. The smell remained. "Do you have family in Kearney?" "Not in the way you mean." "What other way is there?" Kalen considered this. "There are those I am obliged to. A very old obligation. It will be resolved in Kearney." "Business?" "In a sense." He paused. "There is a man in Kearney who has been looking for something that does not belong to him. He has been looking for a long time, and he has caused harm in the looking. I am going to ask him to stop." "Just ask?" The corner of Kalen's mouth moved. It might have been a smile. "I have found over the years that I am very persuasive." Ray watched the road.
A sign emerged from the snow. Kearney, 31 miles. What does he think he's looking for? Ray asked. Kalen was quiet for so long that Ray thought the conversation was over. Then, he thinks he is looking for immortality. He has read certain books, spoken to certain people who should not have been spoken to. He believes that if he can find the source... He stopped. It is a very old story, Mr. Aldrich. The oldest, perhaps. Men who decide that death is an injustice done specifically to them. And you're going to tell him he's wrong? I am going to tell him what immortality actually is, what it costs, what it takes from you decade by decade, until the things that made you human are so far behind that you can no longer even remember their shapes. His voice was very quiet now, nearly swallowed by the wind against the cab. I am going to describe to him in full what he is asking for, and then I will ask him if he still wants it. And if he does? No answer. The snow fell. The road unspooled. 20 miles out of Kearney, the truck hit ice. It happened the way it always happened, without warning, in the space of a blink, the rear of the trailer stepping sideways, the whole rig rotating around a pivot that the laws of physics had decided to install directly under Ray's seat. He did everything right, steered into the slide, eased off the accelerator, kept his hands loose on the wheel. He'd been doing this for 20 years. His hands knew what to do before his brain did. The trailer came back. The truck straightened. Ray let out a breath and looked at his passenger. Kalen had not moved. His hands were still folded in his lap. His eyes were still fixed on the road ahead. He had not braced himself, had not grabbed the armrest, had not made any involuntary animal preparations for impact that every human being made when the ground went sideways. He had sat perfectly still, as if the near accident were happening to someone else in another truck on another road entirely. "You all right?" Ray asked. "Of course," Kalen said. Ray drove more carefully after that. He kept looking at the man's hands. The left one, folded over the right, had a ring on the third finger, old gold, intricately worked, set with a stone so dark it seemed to absorb the dashboard light. Ray was not a man who noticed jewelry. He noticed this ring. He felt, looking at it, the way he felt when he was a boy and his father had taken him to the edge of a bluff above the Platte River. That vertiginous pull, that simultaneous desire to lean forward, and the certain knowledge that leaning forward would be the last thing he ever did. He looked away from the ring. "Kalen," he said. "Yes?" "The man you're going to see, is he dangerous?" "He believes himself to be. Men who are pursuing something they think is secret often become dangerous. They see threats everywhere because they know that what they are doing would be perceived as threatening." A pause. "He has hurt people, yes." "And you're going alone?" "I have always gone alone." Ray thought about that. Outside, the snow was thinning slightly, or the plows had been through this stretch more recently, and the road was emerging in cleaner lines, the yellow center stripe visible in patches. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to know I'm not the kind of person who usually asks things like this." "Ask," Kalen said. "What are you?"
The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of a man selecting his words with the same care a locksmith selects his pick, not stalling, but working. "I am very old," Kalen said at last. "I was born in a place and a time that no longer exists in any form you would recognize. I have outlasted every person I have ever loved, every language I spoke in my youth, every country I called home. I have watched cities rise and burn and rise again. I have walked through plagues. I have seen the shapes that men make with their fear." He paused.
I did not choose what I am. I was made, and for a very long time I was not what you would call good." Ray's hands were steady on the wheel. He was a man who had learned to absorb information on the road without reacting to it, because reacting cost you control, and control was everything. "And now," he said, "now I do what I can with what I have become." The ring caught the light again as he shifted his hands. "There are not many of us left who remember. The ones who remain, most of them have let go of whatever was human in them. It is easier. I understand the choice. I simply cannot make it." The lights of Kearney appeared on the horizon, a smear of amber against the low clouds. "You can let me off anywhere," Kalen said. Ray pulled off the interstate at the first Kearney exit and stopped in the lot of a closed hardware store. The snow was barely falling now, the storm behind them, and the parking lot was clean and still. Kalen reached for the door handle, then stopped. "You have a daughter," he said, not a question. "Lacey, yeah. She asks good questions." He turned and looked at Ray one final time. The eyes, in the amber glow of a sodium light that reached just far enough into the cab, were not entirely dark. There was a depth to them that had nothing to do with color, a sense of distance, like looking at a landscape through a very old window glass, everything slightly refracted, nothing quite where it seemed to be. "You are a good man, Ray Aldrich. You stopped when you did not have to." "Wasn't going to leave an old man in a blizzard." "No," Kalen said, "you weren't." Something in his voice, not warmth exactly, but the memory of warmth, the shape warmth left when it was very old. "There are fewer of you than there should be." He opened the door and climbed down. The cold air came in for a moment, carrying the smell of snow and something older, earthier, and then the door closed and it was gone. Ray watched him in the mirror. Kalen walked across the parking lot toward the dark end, toward the strip of closed shops and unlit signs, and his footprints in the dusting of snow were precise and evenly spaced. And then Ray looked away for a moment to check his mirrors for traffic, and when he looked back, the footprints were there, but Kalen was not. He sat for a long time with the engine running. He thought about the ring with the stone that ate light. He thought about what Kalen had said, "I did not choose what I am, I was made." He thought about his daughter asking where clouds go. They're still there, just invisible. He put the truck in gear. He delivered the freight at 2:17 in the morning. The loading dock crew was 3 men who worked in silence and didn't ask about his drive. He signed the paperwork, accepted a cup of bad coffee, and sat in the cab for 20 minutes before he decided he wasn't going to sleep. He drove to a motel on the commercial strip and paid for a room with a credit card and sat on the bed with his boots still on and his coat still buttoned, looking at the wall. There was a Bible in the nightstand. He did not open it. He was not that kind of man. He thought about calling his ex-wife to hear Lacey's voice, but it was 3 in the morning, and that was not something he did, regardless of how much he wanted to. He took his phone out and typed a search. He didn't know what he was searching for exactly. He typed, "Old European Vampire Folklore, Real Accounts." Then he deleted it. Then he typed it again and pressed search. He read for an hour. He didn't know what he was looking for, and he didn't find it, and somewhere around 4 in the morning, he fell asleep with the phone on his chest and the light still on. He dreamed about the road, the same blizzard, the same dark, his headlights cutting through the snow, and at the shoulder, a figure, the same figure. But when he stopped and the figure walked toward him through the amber glow of the mirror, it was not an old man. It was a young man, dark-haired, sharp-featured, eyes burning with something that might have been hunger, or might have been grief, or might have been the same thing at the beginning, before one becomes the other. The young man climbed into the cab. He looked at Ray. His eyes were exactly like Kalen's eyes, but everything else was different. The hunger visible, not buried, not managed. "You stopped," the young man said. "I did," Ray said. "You should not have stopped," the young man said, and smiled, and the smile was the last thing Ray saw before he woke up. It was morning, gray light through thin curtains. The phone on his chest had died. He sat up and put his boots on the floor and sat for a moment listening to the sounds of the motel, a distant TV, someone's shower, the muffled commerce of the waking world. And he thought about the dream and about what it meant that he had dreamed the same scenario with a different man and a different ending. Then he thought it was a dream. Then he thought the footprints. He got up and plugged in his phone and stood at the window looking at the parking lot below, which was plowed and sanded and ordinary, and he thought about footprints in fresh snow that simply ended in the middle of a parking lot, and he thought about the man who had made them, and he thought about what that man was going to say to someone in this town today. And then, because he was Ray Aldrich, who drove freight and paid his child support on time and called his daughter every Tuesday, and wasn't the kind of man who chased things that weren't his to chase, he went to the shower and got cleaned up and went to find breakfast. He was on his third cup of coffee at a diner 2 blocks from the motel when a man sat down across from him. Ray had not been watching the door. He had been reading a folded newspaper, the same front page he'd been reading for 10 minutes without absorbing any of it. He became aware of the man the way you became aware of a sound that had been going on for longer than you realized, all at once, with the uncomfortable sense that you had been unaware for too long. The man was perhaps 50, heavy-set, dressed in the kind of clothes that were expensive without being flashy, the clothes of a man who had money but didn't want to be remembered for it. He had dark eyes that were very still. "You gave someone a ride last night," the man said. He had an accent, faint, Eastern European, completely different from Kalen's. Ray put down the newspaper. "I give a lot of people rides." "An old man outside Hatchet Falls." Ray looked at him for a long time. The man looked back. His hands were on the table, both of them visible, a gesture that might have been deliberate, might have been innocuous. He wore a ring on his right hand. The stone was dark. Not dark like Kalen's stone, dark like something else, dark like the backs of your eyelids when you press on them and the phosphines fade. "I don't know who you mean," Ray said. The man smiled. It was a patient smile, the smile of someone who had been waiting a long time and learned to wait in comfort. "He told you things, old Kalen. He always tells things. He cannot help himself. He has been silent so long that when someone is kind to him, he opens like a wound." The smile didn't change. "I am looking for him. We have unfinished business, and I thought since you were kind enough to bring him here, you might be kind enough to tell me where he went." Ray thought about the parking lot, the footprints that ended. "I dropped him off and drove away, that's all." "And where?" "I don't know where he went. I didn't watch." He met the man's eyes. They were very still, those eyes, very patient, the patience of something that did not need to hurry, that had all the time it needed, that perhaps had always had all the time in the world. "I don't know anything about your business. I drove a man to Kearney because it was snowing and he was standing in the road." The man looked at him for a long moment. Then he sat back and picked up Ray's abandoned newspaper and glanced at the headline and set it down again. "He is very old, very tired. He thinks he is doing good in the world, going from town to town, correcting mistakes. But he is a mistake himself, you understand. He is something that should not exist, and simply forgotten that fact. He stood. He adjusted his jacket. "If you remember anything, Mr. "I won't." The man nodded once, as if this were the answer he had expected, and walked out.
Ray sat very still for a long time. Outside the window, the street was bright with winter sun on new snow, ordinary and clean and completely itself. A woman pushed a stroller past. A truck made a delivery to the pharmacy across the street. The world proceeded. Ray thought about two things. He thought about the fact that the man had known his name, which Ray had not given him, and he thought about the ring on the man's hand, that dark, light-swallowing stone, and how he had seen it before, on Kalin's hand, on the third finger of the left hand, folded over the right in the cab of his truck in the middle of a Nebraska blizzard. The same ring. He left money on the table and walked out into the cold morning and stood on the sidewalk and thought about that for a long time. A man with a ring looking for another man with the same ring, what that meant, what either of them was, which of them was the one who had been made wrong, and which was the correction, and whether there was a difference, and whether that difference was something a man like Ray Aldrich, who drove freight and loved his daughter and stopped for strangers in snowstorms, could even understand, let alone determine. His phone had enough charge now. He called Lacey. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep and mourning, and she said, "Daddy," in the way she always said it, like a question and an answer at the same time. And he said, "Hey, Bug, sorry it's early." And she said, "I don't care." And he believed her. And he stood on a sidewalk in Kearney, Nebraska, in the winter sun, and talked to his daughter about nothing in particular for 11 minutes. And when he hung up, he felt better and worse in equal measure. He walked back to the motel. He picked up his bag. He drove out of Kearney, heading east, toward home, toward the ordinary world. He did not look for footprints. He did not look for figures at the roadside. He watched the road, which was the only thing he could control, and he drove. Behind him, in the rear view, the flat Nebraska country receded, fields and sky, and a horizon so clean and unbroken you could almost believe that nothing lived out there in the dark between the towns, that the night was just the night, that the things moving through it were only wind and snow and the ordinary, manageable fears of ordinary, manageable men. Almost.
Thank you for listening till the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear more interesting stories.